Welcome back to the show. We're talking about football, or if you prefer, soccer, and we turn our focus now to China. For years, its national women's team has been a highly rated side, and it's done well in World Cup and Olympic tournaments. On the other hand, China's men's teams have struggled, and they're fighting to qualify for the 2018 World Cup in Russia. But China has recently unveiled an ambitious new plan to become a football world powerhouse by 2050. Joining me now from Beijing is Dong Jun. He is a sports commentator for CCTV News, and joining us from London is media entrepreneur John Gubber. He specializes in sports content. Welcome to both of you to the show. Dong Jun, let me start with you, talking about this plan on the part of China to become a soccer powerhouse by 2050. That's just over 30 years to go. What can you tell us about the plan, and do you think China can achieve this?
Well, I think it represents, a lot of people associate this new strategy or target with the president of China, but actually it represents a dream of a generation of people, from leaders, top leaders, down to various levels of authorities, and also, of course, an increasing number among the general public for the country to do better. And because there is a consensus that the relatively poor performance of the national team has so much to do with the relatively weak base of the pyramid, and we need to increase the number of people to be involved and to play and practice football as a hobby and then as a profession for the gradual development to the top professional and national level. And also it represents a vision from this current leadership that football is such a game or sport that involves more players for each match than most of the other available sports. So it's good for such a country like China, the most populous country in the world.
John, you are there in the home of soccer. I think it's safe to say that soccer is a bit of a religion in England. But let's turn to China for a minute. How important do you think it will be for world football if China succeeds with this plan? At the moment, China is about, 81st in FIFA world rankings. But if this plan succeeds, what will it do?
I think it would be wonderful for the game of football if China can elevate themselves into a higher position in their world standings, because it is a world game. It is the beautiful game, but it's also the world game. And China is obviously a force to be reckoned with in terms of numbers, and obviously successful in many other sports. Obviously, it's fascinating from a distance here in London to see what's happening in China, because some of the top teams in England or top teams around Europe are having some of their star or bigger names being targeted by Chinese clubs, and it is fascinating to see what's going on. As Don Jung said, it's obviously a long way to go in terms of how successful the team can be and how quickly they can get there. But it's fascinating to see the strides that are being taken. And here in England, of course, we've just seen the minnows in Leicester City win the Premier League. So it's nothing's impossible.
Right.
Not anymore, anyway.
As we've been talking about that, Dong Jun, the China men's team, as I mentioned, has not done very well in international tournaments, but the women's team, on the other hand, has done very well at the World Cup and at the Olympics as well. So do you see China becoming a powerhouse in women's soccer as well?
Of course, also as in other sports, the Chinese women's are normally doing better than their men's counterparts. But the past relatively successful performances by the women's team, including that performance, the runner-up finish to the United States during the Clinton administration years, actually represent the advantage of centralized training, the old Soviet style concentrated training of a very small number of professional or those national players, because the total number of women's players in China who train and play regularly are just in their hundreds, or very tiny compared to the total population of girls playing soccer in the United States. So that's not a model that China will pursue. China now is pushing forward a plan that involves a greater number of players of football as a base for the pyramid, as I mentioned. So both women and men I think China is now pushing forward a completely different vision, a more ambitious vision. And I think more important than the ultimate goal, I think what's on the leadership's mind is the process. I mean, what football can create as business opportunities, as genre opportunities, to related to football as an entire business or industry.
All right, John, China has the Football Super League right now, and it's starting to pay millions of dollars to start recruiting international players. I'm wondering, what will that do to develop the game in China? And the other thing is, do you think China is going to start to attract the big names from, the big footballing nations around the world?
Yeah, certainly. I think at the end of the day, money obviously talks. And we're talking about two different things here. Of course, you've got the Chinese national team who want to be successful long term. But in the short term, there's no reason, in my mind, why the Chinese Super League can't grow in stature at a very quick rate, because they've obviously got the money to spend. We've seen in the last transfer window, I think the transfer record was broken 4 times. And there were some other major bids being made from what we hear here in London, certainly, where Chelsea rejected a bid for Oscar, one of their star players. A very big bid was made for him, and the transfer record was broken 4 times, as I said. And we've had a couple of players that we know here in London, Gervinho, who played for Arsenal, and Ramirez, who played for Chelsea, who have gone over to China. So if we're attracting that caliber of player to the league, there's no reason why the league can't grow quite quickly from where it was before. And I've seen in my research that the attendances have gone up in recent years, and the TV money is starting to increase at quite a big rate from what it was a few years ago. So clearly the league is starting to take strides and go forward and grow. It's a case of, will the league grow and will the national team not? It's how can those two things really coexist, and who will win the race, I guess.
Right, and you've been focusing a lot of attention on what is happening in China. You've got some of the big teams going to play in China in the next few months as well.
So from England, we've got Manchester United and Manchester City who are going to be playing in Beijing on the 25th of July, I think it is. And Manchester United also have a game against the German team Borussia Dortmund. So, for a team like Manchester United and Manchester City, it's very important to go to a place like China, because there's a massive fan base, and clearly there's a lot of interest in football, because there's a lot of people in China who follow the English Premier League. So it's very important to the clubs over here to continue that, to grow that support, basically. I know Manchester United, who claim to have 1 in 10 people on the planet who support the football team, they claim to have over 100 million fans in China alone. So it's not a place that they're ever going to ignore, and they obviously want to grow their fan base. And it's going to be fascinating for me as a filmmaker. I'm hoping to get over to China in July to do a documentary, which I've been working on, to come and look firsthand to see what's happening. But first, to see the enthusiasm for the game, which I'm sure we'll see when Manchester United and Manchester City arrive in China, but also to see what's happening at the grassroots, because at the end of the day, the long-term success of the sport is going to depend on the participation at grassroots level, and that's obviously the key thing for the future.
Right, absolutely. And Dongjun, when we look at Chinese involvement internationally in soccer, there are reports that there are Chinese investors who want to buy the legendary Italian team, AC Milan. Do you see Chinese investors getting more and more involved internationally in trying to purchase these high-profile clubs? And what does that do for soccer in China?
I think yes. I wouldn't be surprised if more investment abroad, especially in Europe, would involve Chinese capital into big powerhouses in football. Because if you look at the Chinese economy, some of the biggest investors are actually losing interest because there are not many other opportunities or good projects attracted to them anymore. So they need to look beyond China to the rest of the world, and they realize that with the increasing interest or attention of Chinese fans or the population into Western or international culture and sports, that will represent great opportunities. I mean, commercial opportunities, if they can, attract attention from inside China to the international stage, including European League matches, then that will generate more commercial interest and advertising income. And then the match live broadcast over the weekend of some European matches will create more opportunities. I mean, viewership even back home here in China, that will, will mean greater, greater income.
John, looking down the road, do you see the day when China will not just host a World Cup, but possibly win it as well?
I believe in fairy tales. I do, and the guy likes to dream about achieving things. And as I said before, we've seen Leicester City this season win the Premier League, and there's no reason in my mind why, if they start to grow the game at grassroots level and the players start to come through the academies, and you've got these inspirational players that they're going to sign from the big clubs around Europe, it's all going to grow the interest in the game. And I don't see any reason why a country like China can't be successful in the future. They've obviously got enough people over there. I'm sure they can find 11 players to put in a team to be successful at national level. There's absolutely no reason in my mind why that can't be done. And an interesting thing I'd like to throw in is, it's only December last year we saw Chinese consortium buy 13% of Manchester City, allegedly the richest football club in the world. So it's interesting to see that they've taken a stake in a club like Manchester City. And I know at the time the businessmen involved were saying it wasn't just about having a stake in the football club, it was about learning and getting intelligence from the football club by being associated with them. So I think it's good to see that it's being attacked from all directions, really, trying to grow the game in China. It's very exciting to see from a distance here in London.
Okay, Dong Jun, very quickly, we're looking at the next World Cup in Russia. How do you rate China's chances there?
Well, I don't think China has a very high expectation in their chances, because they didn't even expect their national team to enter into the next round, next stage in the Asian qualifiers. But, they will see what happens. They will try their best, but I don't think the Chinese public or Chinese fans have a very high expectation in the national team to qualify from Asia.